members. That way I'm going to call your name if you'll just let me know that you're present. Again, I'm Brian Murphy. I'm chairing it. Steve Reinhardt, are you present?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Michael DeHart, are you present? Okay, Michael DeHart, are you present? And that then next we have Greg Eakin, are you present?
Present and accounted for.
Barbara Evans, are you present?
This is Barbara. I'm present.
Okay, thank you, Barbara. Elizabeth Heidelberg. And then Brad Phillips, are you present?
Brad Phillips, and I'm present.
Lee Warren, are you present?
Lee Warren here.
Excuse me, someone needs to turn their phone down or mute it.
Lee Warren, are you present?
Lee Warren's still here.
Okay. And then Fred Wilcox.
I'm here.
Okay, thank you. Again, since we're going to have so many people online, the request is if you can please mute yourself. And that right now I see that Avis is online, Bill Jones is online, John Cahill is with us, Rebecca Till is with us, and then Stan Harbuck is with us. And then we have Tony, who's in the office with you?
Okay, Tony Slagle, Government Affairs, is here, and then
Jennifer Wheeler, Education Manager. Sarah Lewis, General Counsel.
Michael Malloy, Staff Attorney, Enforcement.
Mark Morris, Standards and Enforcement Services.
Kristen Warman, Deputy General Counsel.
Doug Oldmixon, the Administrator. And then we have two guests.
three guests.
Oh, I'm sorry. Fred showed up. Sorry, go ahead.
And who are our two guests that are with us?
Go ahead.
We have three. Fred Buck is here. Mr. Mark Goodson, who's a professional engineer. And Ms. Lavera Vincent, who's the Executive Director of the Brennan Teal Foundation.
Brennan Teal. Okay, thank you. And then I've also now arrived Jim Narva, and then Mike Cochran is also with us as well. So thank you everybody for being here. And what we'll do again, because we have so many present, please mute your mic unless you're on the committee. And then if you want to talk, you'll in the little sidebar on the right-hand side, there's a spot for chat, and just basically put an item in there, type in the fact that you want to speak, and then I will call on you at that point in time. So our first item of discussion, again, thank you everybody for coming together for this particular meeting. Tony, if you'll move the agenda down just a little bit.
Oh,
and first, that's okay. First item of discussion is discussion possible action regarding comments received for the proposed amendment to 535212 concerning education and experience requirements for a licensee. And so what I'll do is, Tony, do you want to lead that one up, or do you want the education?
Well, Carrie, do you want to speak? I'm sorry, Kristen, do you want to speak to it?
Yes. Everyone, as you may recall, the committee considered and recommended amendments to Rule 212, which were proposed at the November commission meeting. And we received a couple of comments in response to the proposal that was published. Specifically, those comments are in your materials. We received a comment from Stan and Donna Harbuck, and the request was to add the word previously to the proposed amendments in subsection G 1B3 to ensure that there is not confusion and that courses that have been previously approved by the Commission will not be held to the definition in that section. In other words, they would not have to get reapproved under the new definition.
And so meaning that the extension to March 1st, 2016, they will comply with that extension, and just adding the word previously just clarifies the fact that those courses are approved and are extended till March 1st, 2016. Is that correct?
That is the request. The Harbucks believe that there would be some confusion, but frankly, the Commission's practice is to apply amendments to its rules on a going forward basis, and any courses that have already been approved would not be subject to the amended language in the rule until those courses are up for reapproval. In other words, a course that has already been approved would not become subject to the rule change until its approval expires and it has to be resubmitted to the Commission for approval.
And this is Carrie. Just as a clarification, when you're talking about courses being extended to March of 2016, any course that expires before that time would have to meet these new requirements, whatever.
Right.
So I think a lot of the courses that we're talking about are probably all going to expire December 31st of 2015, just so you're aware of that.
Right, because that's the rule that that applied, that if it was done before you started giving course numbers and expiration dates, all of those automatically expire the December of 15. Is that correct?
Exactly.
That's correct.
Right. That's kind of what that was my understanding of it as well. So I guess my first question is it necessary to further clarify by putting in previously, or is it pretty much understood by education that this one only applies to new courses being approved?
This is Kristen, and staff's recommendation would be not to accept the comment that there is no need to insert the word previously.
Right. Okay. And then I noticed in the material that this is just the stuff that was previously approved. It doesn't necessarily. We're not recommending more changes. Is that correct? In agenda item.
Correct. That's correct. Yes.
This is the stuff that is that the committee already previously approved.
Well,
the committee recommended these changes to the Commission, and the Commission has proposed them. So they will be up for adoption. These changes will be up for adoption at the Commission meeting on February 9th. So the issue for this committee today is to consider the comment that was received and make a recommendation to the Commission as to whether or not you want to add the word previously or not.
Right. Okay. Hey, Stan, I'm going to call on you. If you do not mind, I'd like for you to, since you submitted this request and you're with us, is this your understanding, and are you okay with the fact that not adding previously, and that I think the Commission fully understands the requirements or what needs to be done?
Brian, Stan Harbuck.
Yes.
It sounds like it's pretty clear that it takes it allows any currently approved course to continue on until they expire, I think it was mentioned that they expire at the end of this year. And so, but if a course were to be reapplied for those next 2 months, which would be January and February, it would have to be under the new rules. So, without going into a lot of detail, I think we feel comfortable with that, so long as that is the interpretation.
Yes, and Stan, while you're still on the phone, the interpretation is that you can continue to operate the way you're operating until the course expires by, December 31st of 2015, if it's not already a course that's been approved for longer. And that if it's a course that has been previously approved for longer, then you're able to operate until March 1st of 2016. Is that
right,
your understanding?
Yes, that's my understanding. I don't think any of the courses actually can't even apply for reapproval on a course until 2 months before it expires. So I don't think anyone, the January and February is lost, but, which defeats somewhat, at least partly, the purpose of the committee's making it a March 1 deadline. But like I said, life isn't perfect, and we'll just try to work with that.
And Stan, for clarification, you can submit another course, before this one expires. It's just going to be a different course number and everything as it gets approved.
This is Jennifer,
I see.
Education Manager. There's nothing that prevents you from going ahead and submitting a course at any time that would be complicit with the new rules, and we would be happy to review that and approve that for you, assuming it meets the regulation standards.
Thank you.
Thank you, Stan. So basically what we have is, I'm going to go through the committee real quick. And Steve Reinhardt, are you okay with the language being the way it is and no further action needed?
Yeah, if truly the not using the previously in there, yeah, it seems like most things are like that in our industry, that if there's a change in the rules, it applies as of the acceptance day of the rule, and things that are already in place would go until they expire, and then when they renew, they would go per the new rules. And if that's the way it appears that's going to work, then it seems like it's doing the same thing as the intent of this letter request. And I agree with that.
And and the reason why I called on Steve first, he's the chair of the Education Subcommittee. And so, Fred, are you okay with the way it's written? No further action needed?
Yeah, the way it's written is what we agreed to. It's fine.
Okay, and then Barbara Evans, also on the committee, are you okay with the way it's written?
Yes, I'm in agreement.
Okay. So, sounds good. Is there, from the other committee members, is there any one of you that feels like we need to make a change? Brad?
I'm in favor of leaving it as it is, that I had previously.
Okay, Lee Warren?
No, I think it's fine as it is.
Okay. And then Greg?
I'm fine with it like it is.
Okay, I believe I covered all the committee members present, so that's we have a consistent. So there's no further action needed on this one. So we'll move.
Brian?
Yes.
Brian, could you just go on the record and request a motion and a second that the committee is in favor with the language as it is?
I can do that. Yeah.
I'm Brad Phillips, and I'll make a motion to accept it as written.
Okay.
This is Fred.
I'll second.
Have a second. Brad first, Barbara second. Is there any further discussion? And then we'll take a vote by the end. Basically, everybody's already said it needs to stay as is.
Right.
Yes, that's acceptable.
Okay. Thank you. We'll go to agenda item number 3, discussion possible action regarding notice of corrugated stainless steel tubing, CST, observed during an inspection. So, Tony, I'm going to put you on the spot first and kind of give us a little background why the history, how many times we've dealt with this, and then the agenda item that we currently have on here.
Okay. Well, this will be, I think, the third time that that the committee has seen this item. Initially, the manufacturers of the product approached the commission and the inspector committee to come up with some notification language, and the inspector committee went on record stating that they already call out any deficiencies in bonding and grounding of the gas system, and that no further action was needed at that time. I believe most times that was the case.
Hold on. Tony, go ahead and mute everybody.
Okay. And then it's brought up on today because there's a possibility of some potential legislative action to present some language that inspectors would need to call out should CSST be present. And so it was thought that the inspector committee should get together and once again determine whether or not there was something that they would feel comfortable recommending to the commission to move forward in terms of this particular product and any notice language. So that's why it's been brought up again today. Okay.
Thank you, Tony.
Sure.
And please, everybody in the audience, know that we can hear your background noise, so please keep it to a minimum. It does interrupt the internet connection. Okay, so just I want to kind of go through our standards of practice real quick, and just as for a history portion of it, because this is the third time that it's come up again, and that I know there are some recommendations, but remember in our standards of practice, whenever we talk about the scope of inspection, basically it's a non-technically exhaustive. This is on the home inspector side. I know there are people out there listening that don't quite understand everything a home inspector is supposed to do, and so just home inspections are not technically exhaustive, meaning the inspectors are not using specialized equipment, specialized instruments, and specialized procedures. Also, in our standards of practice, it specifically says in our general limitations, the inspector is required to determine basically insurability, product lawsuits, compliance with any codes, listing, testing, or protocol authorities, and manufacturing regulatory requirements as specified within the standards. And there are some specific items within the standard that comes to grounding and bonding. So basically, I think it's Mike Cothran, so you can mute Mike Cothran for me. So basically, the standards say, unless specified within the standards, you're not required to do this. Okay, so grounding and bonding is a code item that has to be addressed, and it's within the standards that are specifically listed within our standards. Also, that the inspector is not required to anticipate future events or conditions that might occur to a property, and then the inspector is also not required to designate any component or anything as safe within the home. And then when we go specifically to our electrical section of our standards of practice, which is going to be 535229, it basically says the service, entrance, and panels, and the inspector's calling out deficiencies in this area. one of the things the inspector is required to do is report as deficiencies in grounding and bonding. Now that's on the service side of things as well. So then we go to the branch circuits, which is going to be your distribution wiring, whether, and then your connected devices and fixtures, and the inspector is required to report as deficiencies in bonding and grounding. So again, it's specifically listed within the standards of practice that the inspector is calling out deficiencies, visible deficiencies in grounding and bonding, and with the knowing that the inspector, this is a visual inspection, and the inspector is not required to use specialized procedures or specialized tools, equipment to be able to verify this. So it is specifically within the standards of practice that the inspector is calling out deficiencies, visible deficiencies in grounding and bonding. One of the visual deficiencies is the lack of bonding on components that need to be bonded. So if the inspector is performing a visual inspection, then they see CSST in the home. One of the things the inspector is looking, visually inspecting for, is that component bonded? In the industry, it's been doing a really good job ever since this came up. Channel 5 News has started making a bunch of news reports, and it got really brought to the forefront of the industry that the association started giving classes specifically on CSST and the bonding requirements of CSST. And so I think the industry is doing real well already on making sure the inspectors are doing what they need to be doing. And again, it's already specifically addressed. And one of the things that we've talked about in our last meeting was that Lee Warren is currently in the review process of the standards of practice. And again, I apologize. Let me go one more step into the standards of practice. In the plumbing section, and I'll go to plumbing section 535231. The inspector is required to report as deficiencies in the condition of the gas distribution system. And so the inspector is looking at the gas distribution section, gas distribution system as required by their standards of practice as well. So that being said, Lee Warren is in the process of going through a review process of the standards. And one of the things that I suggested to him that in the gas system, whenever we were going through this review process, that we take out the, we have, I guess, comments or requirements. That's what I was looking for. That we have requirements for reporting deficiencies in gas connectors and gas shutoffs and locations and accessibility. And it's in the heating section, it's in the water heater section, it's in the appliance section. And instead of having it in all of these different locations where it's kind of spread throughout the standards, that the recommendation was to consolidate it and in the plumbing section add a fourth area where we have, currently we have in our inspection report form, we have the plumbing distribution system, we have the drains, waste pipes and vents, we have the water heater, and we have the hydrotherapy equipment. So we would be adding a fifth one and call it gas distribution. So if it's an all-electric house, you would just check not present. But if it was, gas items were present, then we would report all of this in this one particular area. And there has been discussion on CSST as report the presence of, and that I'll leave to the subcommittee to continue to do their work. So it is something that is still on the forefront and still being considered, And I know that the commissioners asked us to have this particular subcommittee so we can be prepared to discuss it at their commission meeting on February the 9th, and also because there are people saying that we're going to the legislator because we're not doing enough. It is being considered, and it's still in the process of being considered. So what I'm going to do is call on each one of the inspector committee members and get your take on what you believe might need to be done today, or let the subcommittee continue to do their work, knowing that the work is in the process. And I'd like to get a feel for what your thoughts are. So what I'm going to do is actually I'll start with the Standards of Practice Subcommittee, because this is a standards thing. And the Standards of Practice Subcommittee is also in charge of the report form, because they kind of go hand in hand when we're addressing standards of practice issues that directly affect the report form. So Lee Warren, I'm going to call on you first and let you speak about this topic and what you think needs to be done at this point in time. Lee.
All right. I mean, I'm not going to take a whole lot of time on this. I think that we've really discussed this in great lengths, multiple occasions. We've covered the number of different spots that it's on, that it really is covered through the current standards of practice. As far as what we should be doing today, I think as a full committee, I don't really think we should do anything today just because the legislature might do something. I'm not a big fan of going in and trying to make rules to go ahead of the legislature and that type of stuff, because who's to say that they're not going to come in and make another rule that we're going to have to change again anyway. So I'm not a big fan of going in and just changing something because the legislature might do something. If the legislature does something, then great. We'll deal with it at that time, and we'll address it as it comes up. But the issue in and of itself of the gas distribution system, the CSST, any corrugated stainless steel tubing, any of those issues really should go through the Standards of Practice Subcommittee and go through the right channels for full adoption by the full committee, rather than just kind of coming through this way. I think if we have a process, we started the review process, let's let it take its course. Nothing in this review process is quick and easy. If the process gets circumvented by the legislature and we have to make certain adjustments quickly, then I have no doubt that we as a committee will do that. But at this time, I really don't see any reason for us to change it. The current standards cover checking for grounding and bonding in those areas. I don't like the thought of us starting to throw individual components like this into the standards, because if you start throwing in CSST, you'll start throwing in Federal Pacific stab blocks, you'll start throwing in Zincos, you'll start throwing in 1,000 other manufacturers of products that are known to have certain deficiencies with that installation. And I think we're opening up a can of worms if we really start catering to this. Our reports are going to be substantially longer than they already are and harder for the consumer to digest. And that's it for me.
Okay, thank you, Lee. And then also for clarification, one of the reasons why this is being brought up as well is because if it does go to the legislators will mandate what the verbiage will be, or the way it should be reported, or what words should be used. So one of the things that to be discussed today is, there is no quick fix for this, because I know it's a hot topic. There's no easy or quick fix to it, but if the legislators get involved, and they mandate what the inspector has to say, that's one of the things that we're looking at as well. If we can put something in temporarily while the review process is going, so it it shows that we're actually doing, our due diligence and, for consumer protection, that, that we can make modifications to our own stuff versus, the legislator saying this is the way it has to be, and then you have to live with that for 2 years to get it changed again. So kind of keep that in mind as well. So Lee, do you have a response to that?
No, I mean, you hit it. There is no quick fix to it, and I get I think that we've, in opening the process to review the standards of practice, I mean, everything's open for change. And this topic is obviously not going away anytime soon. We're probably going to have to find some way to address it, even though I feel it's already been addressed. But that's part of the process. I think we need to go through that process and let it run its course before we start trying to make any quick fix action, which inevitably isn't going to work.
Right, and history shows that any time that we make a knee-jerk reaction, it often it has come back to bite us in the past. You know, it needs to be methodical and really thought out the way adding one line item here, how it affects the rest of the standards and how it affects the consumers throughout the state of Texas. And so we'll keep that in mind as well. So Fred Wilcox next.
Okay, Brian. First of all, everything that goes through is bites us. Can you hear me?
Yes, I
Brian?
can hear you.
Okay, Brian. It's from history. Everything that goes through bites us in the backside. So it's kind of irrelevant how it occurs. I sent out a bunch of information, hopefully to keep this meeting relatively short, to help everybody understand more of the situation. I have opposed including the notification because, as has been stated by you, Brian, very well, this is in multiple places in the standards. Bonds have to be visible. If they're not visible, they're not there. So it's really not complex and never has been. There has been an issue of knowledge of the material in the past, and I talked to Brian this morning, explained I have that same issue on some of my historical reports where this was not known. And so personally, as an inspector, I have concerns there. But this committee does not exist to limit civil liabilities, and that's not our purpose. Our purpose is notification. And I think after weighing all of this, there is a notification that needs to be made. But if there's going to be one made, it needs to be made to everyone. So in my opinion, putting it simply in the standards may notify a buyer of an existing condition in a home, but if the buyer renovates, buys new appliances, remodels the kitchen, CSST comes into the house without their knowledge, and they don't know the hazard exists. So I think if you put it in the preamble, the notification's there. All consumers have the right to then do their due diligence to learn about it on their own and make their own determination of what's safe or not. And with that, I will also recommend that we recommend the commissioners that they include this in the seller's disclosure, again, for full notification of buyers and sellers. And to my way of thinking, that's the best way we can inform all consumers of the existence of the hazard and do our jobs correctly. And so I do think there is not a quick, perfect fix, but there is a notification fix while everything else is considered. And as far as the language that was proposed by the manufacturer, as I pointed out in what I wrote, most of this in there is incorrect factually. So I certainly would be completely opposed to that. So that's what I've got, Brian.
Okay. Thank you, Fred. And Steve Reinhardt with Education, will you let me know how you feel about this particular item?
Man, this is a kind of a can of worms here. Also, I'm looking at it. Yes, it's a problem. Well, it's an exposure to a liability, but as I researched and looked down at statistics nationally from the fire risk, because the main causes for houses burning down, I mean, lightning and fires from gas, it's so far down into the percentages of 1%. If we're going to do something like this to look out for the consumers, wouldn't we start with things that are up in the 50 percentile range? Or, I like this idea of trying to identify things, but we're starting, I mean, on one hand, I think we're starting at the bottom of the list as far as potential, not potential, but possibilities of what happens out there. You know, we're looking at gas lines. Typically, when we think of a fire from a gas pipe, whether it's CSST or anything, you're associating it with lightning, which is way down in the, in the percent of 1% of the reason houses burn down. And if that's our main goal, you would almost think, like Lee says, where would we stop? How many things would we put in the disclaimer, or not disclaimer, but exposure, or try to inform the homeowner? I think it's in there. I think personally, and everybody I talk with, if they see gas piping, if they see gas in a house, regardless of CSST or anything, if you see gas pipe before CSST, it's probably not bonded either. I pretty much, if I have a gas house, I put on there, if I don't see the bonding, regardless of the type of material, that it needs to be verified that it is bonded by a licensed electrician.
Okay.
And I think that's kind of covered, regardless of CSST is a little more of exposure because of the thin wall, but you can get it. I mean, a steel gas pipe still has the same issue. It can be energized. And my house wasn't. I mean, after all this started, I got a grounding rod and a clamp and a pipe, and I grounded mine because it wasn't built from the 90s.
Okay.
So I'm not really in favor of trying to add it if I have no idea what the legislature is doing. That was kind of news to me. I don't want to try to stay one step in front of them and they go a different direction. But I'm in favor of Lee continuing looking at it, seeing if it's appropriate to add it based on what's happening there.
And what are your thoughts about making a recommendation for putting it in the preamble under the Texas Recognized Hazard section? So listing CSST in the preamble as kind of a notice.
The OP1 list.
Yes. Yeah, the OP1 list.
I wouldn't be against it, but at the same time, I don't know if it would open up. Yeah, I see what you have there. The presence of CSST, I would be more inclined to say the absence of bonding of any. I mean, it's not just CSST. My house has gas pipe, but then I did additions to it, and unbeknownst to me, the plumbers used CSST in the addition, so I got a mix later through renovations. I think if you have gas piping, you could make the comment, like the one right above, the lack of electrical bonding or grounding. You could almost, I mean, if you wanted to do that, you could enhance that. Okay. Because some people don't think of gas piping as needing bonding, but this list could get real long real quick.
No, and I agree with you on that. And yeah, so that was one of the recommendations, is putting it either in that list or putting there is also a recommendation of possibly adding a sentence to the preamble as well. So, okay. Anything else, Steve?
No, sir.
Okay. And then, and I apologize, Barbara Evans, do you have anything you want to? Go ahead.
No, I appreciate the great detail you guys have given. I understood the first go-round. What has amazed me is the amount of personal contact and feedback I've gotten, so I know what an issue this is. I really appreciate Lee's view about how we can deal with this going forward. I don't think it's going to go away, but I tend to agree with you on that.
Okay, and just how do you feel about adding something to the preamble, the inspection report form, either adding it at the sentence or adding it in the consumer notice recognized hazards as a
yeah.
point. What are
If you're all comfortable with that, it might be a good idea to acknowledge that, because I think the misunderstanding is just a perception that we didn't deal with it and consider it and have it included. But, you know, I'm redoing gas pipeline in my 100-year-old house, and everyone talks about it. Brian's right. There's a big awareness of what's going on. So, but this would maybe cover it.
Okay. Okay, so, all right. So thank you, Barbara.
That preamble, yeah.
And then Greg Eakin?
If it was just strictly up to me by myself, I would put it in the preamble and just try to. I'm also wondering, is it one of those items that has to be in the seller's disclosure or not?
It's not at this time, so that's one of the things that I have forgotten to ask each individual that we've called upon, is if they would have a recommendation to go to the commissioners and have this as something that's added to the seller's disclosure as well.
Well, I would definitely be in favor of asking that to be added in the seller's disclosure. I think that the homeowner should know if there's any CSST in his house. If not, if it's something, then we need to start educating the realtors on. I think the inspectors are getting a lot of education right now on this topic. I know I'm reading about it every week probably from somewhere, somehow. And I would be in favor of putting it in the preamble and adding it to the seller's disclosure so the realtors and the sellers start getting educated on what it is also.
Brian?
That's okay.
Brian, this is Carrie. May I talk about the seller's disclosure for a minute?
Yes, you may.
The seller's disclosure is recommended to the commission by the broker-lawyer committee, so it would have to go through the broker-lawyer committee. But historically, the broker-lawyer committee has only recommended the statutory language that's dictated by the legislature. So if the legislature changes the statute that has the exact language in it, that's what the commission has historically adopted.
I was aware that it needed to go through the broker-lawyer committee. Thank you for educating us on that part of it as well. And this is something that could be presented to Texas Association of Realtors as well, because they have their own separate seller's disclosure that goes above and beyond the one that the state mandates.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you. And then Fred, you wanted to speak?
Yeah, Brian, sorry I had to unmute. Because historically they've done that doesn't preclude us making the recommendation, and sometimes habits get changed under the right circumstances. So I appreciate what Carrie said, but I don't think that affects whether or not we go forward with the recommendation.
Oh, no, that's not what I meant. We'd have to make the recommendation to the broker-lawyer committee, and they could consider it. I was just letting you know what they have done in the past.
And I appreciate that, but I think we could still go forward. And again, as what Brian said, I also agree with that we could go to TAR and bring it to their attention and see if they want to get involved too. Thank you, Brian.
Okay, thank you. And Greg, thank you. Brad Phillips.
I have no issue putting it in the preamble or adding to the OPI form as well. However, I think we need to be careful how we word that when we put that in there, because some CSST pipe does not require bonding per manufacturer's instructions. For instance, the black cover specifically does not require it according to their stuff. So I think we have to be careful how we word that.
Okay, so I'm keeping up with the list here. So you're in favor with putting it in the preamble as well?
I am.
Okay, and then we just, we need to work on wording. not necessarily has to be done today, but we can let the commissioners know that we are addressing it, and that we'll bring it to them in a later meeting as well. That it is on the forefront and that it's being worked on. Okay. And Lee, I did call on you, so that is Barbara, Greg, Lee. Okay. And so, Lee, I'm going to come back to you real quick and put it in the preamble, yes or no.
I'm up for that discussion on putting in the preamble. I have kind of the same reservations as Brad. He brings up a good point. It's really going to be tricky on how we word it. But, I mean, I'm open to that discussion. I don't know if I'm really sold on putting it in the preamble because, again, it's kind of opening that can of worms of how long is that preamble going to be before we actually get to the report. But I'm certainly open to having that discussion.
Okay, thank you. And Lee, what do you think about making a recommendation for the seller's disclosure?
I think that's really where it's better suited is in the seller's disclosure, and I think that would be a good recommendation to make.
Okay, thank you, Lee. And Barbara, I'm going to come back to you again, and what are your thoughts about making a recommendation to have it added to the seller's disclosure?
Yes, if you all are comfortable with that, I think that would be a wise way to go, and then we can continue to look at this. And the wording is something to be cautious about. I do see that for sure.
Thank you. And then Steve Reinhardt, your recommendation for seller's disclosure?
I wouldn't be against having it put in both of them, either one.
Okay.
Good. Brian? Brad Phillips, may I speak?
Yes.
I think we've discussed this enough that I'd like to make a motion.
Okay.
That we amend the preamble and the OPI form to put a notification of some type that there may be some type of corrugated stainless steel piping in the house that may require bonding. And I'll further that motion that we recommend to the commission that they recommend to the broker lawyer committee that the notification be put in the seller's disclosure.
Okay.
And that can be worded however staff needs to word it.
So we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Brian,
Okay.
Brian, would you repeat the motion?
Yeah, Brad Phillips has made a motion, and I'm not sure, and I'll ask Tony here in a second, because I think it's two separate ones, if you ask me. But
I think
made
it's
a motion,
two separate.
Yeah, made a motion to add something to the preamble about CSST, gas piping, gas tubing, and that to add that. And then the second part, and I think it actually should be a second motion, is to have the sector committee make a recommendation to the commissioners about adding into the seller's disclosure if the homeowner knows is aware of CSST being within their property.
Okay. I got confused with them being run together, but if there are two separate motions, I'll second it. And Brian, I just sent you a suggested language that may work.
Okay. And that, Brad, is it okay if you redo that as a single motion
Yes,
for one item, motion for the other item?
Yes, I'll make that as two separate motions.
Okay. And since we're being recorded, will you repeat it for us?
My first motion would be that we add some language to the preamble stating that there may be a presence of some type of corrugated stainless steel tubing in the property that may require bonding. And in addition to the preamble, I think it ought to go in the OPI form as well. That's the primary motion.
Okay, so that's, do I have a second to that motion?
Yes, Steve will second.
I'll second it.
Okay. Well, Steve, you have the first second, so we have a motion and a second. Does anybody have any particular item they want to discuss on that one? So, Steve, you have a discussion point for this one?
I guess a question, if we put it there, is that in the preamble, is that necessitating a new form for us?
It would. It would. We'd have to, and if you're going to amend the OPI, I'm guessing that the language would be put in those bullet points in the preamble as well. That's where it would mirror new language in the OPI form as well.
I think that's what we were thinking is the one that's on the screen now, something similar worded to that.
Well, hey, Brian, I know that Fred sent you some language. I don't know if you want to pull that up, and I can switch the screen over, and then everyone who has access to the computer could see it. It might be beneficial if you're making this motion that we know exactly what language we're amending it to or recommending.
Brian, hey, Brian.
Go ahead.
I just added another part, but what I suggested is the lack of, I would say the lack of visible bonding on corrugated stainless steel gas tubing, in parentheses, CSST, and I'd also add, or any other metal gas piping where required.
This is.
Why don't you just say any gas piping?
Yeah, because all gas piping is required to be, all metal piping
That's
is required.
fine. Well, metal's somewhat redundant, I agree, but.
Yeah. I know we're trying to address a specific type. And Fred, just a second. Fred, for whatever reason, I don't have that language. Did you email it to me or?
No, I sent it to you in the chat section.
Oh.
Chat. Second wording lack. Sorry, I had a couple come in real quick. So.
Do you want me to repeat it slowly?
Lack of bonding on corrugated stainless steel gas tubing.
And then go down a couple more, and I sent you the metal pipe part.
Add or metal tubing or piping. And Fred, are you making the recommendation that it goes into the Texas Real Estate Consumer Notice concerning hazards and deficiencies?
Yes,
as a bullet?
along with Brad's motion. I'm trying to get the language.
Right. Okay.
Can we get the language?
And
hey, Brian, I'm sorry. This is Tony. It appears that Fred just sent that to you, so no one here or anyone else on the conference can see what the language says. Is there any way you could forward that?
I'll make it public. Give me just a second. I'll highlight that too.
And it is a suggested opening comment. I'm certainly open to revisions.
Right.
This is Lee. If I can make a comment for a second.
Go ahead.
It seems to me like we're kind of jumping the gun here, which is exactly what we said we weren't going to do. Of just making a quick decision and throwing this together. The motion on the floor is to put some language in the OPI, which is very, very vague, and I understand we're trying to quickly nail this down, and it's like we're trying to throw this together. If we're going to put something that's going to be in the OPI in the preamble and change the form for it, my suggestion would we take a little bit more time than just this spontaneous phone call to try and throw language together to make it right. We have another meeting coming up in February. Why can't we put this on that agenda specifically to put language in the OPI or the preamble for bonding of gas piping so that we can ensure if we're going to do it, we're going to do it right and not throw something together only to find out later on that we really should have worded it a different way or something like that. My fear is we're throwing this together a little too quick to try and satisfy certain people, and I think if we're going to change the form, change the OPI, change the preamble, we really need to make sure that a little more care is taken to make sure it's done right the first time.
Right, and thank you for bringing us back around again, Lee. And
Brian,
I agree.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. I apologize.
Yeah, Lee, I agree with you, and it's not something that we have to do today. My thought was we're going to be going to the commissioners and letting them know that we are addressing it, and that everybody has agreed that it needs to be addressed, but you know, we were going to put it on the agenda for another item. You know, Fred has sent the recommendations. It's not something that we have to do right now. Okay, so Tony?
Well, Brian, I was just going to suggest it still has to go through the process of 2 meetings. So if you guys did come up with language, it's not like in the February meeting it would be adopted and be effective immediately. It would just get the ball rolling so that any consideration in language that needed to be amended going forward in the February meeting could be addressed and brought forward in May and then adopted at that point at the commission meeting. Just a suggestion that it still has to go through that process. So.
Yeah, I understand it. Yeah, Fred, I understand it has to go through the process, but you know, we don't want to rush it. You know, we do want to let the commissioners know and the public know that it is being addressed, and that we want to make sure that we don't have a knee-jerk reaction. Because one of the things I discussed with one of the other committee members was if we put it in the preamble right here, it actually does directly affect the standards of practice, because everything in the Texas Real Estate Consumer Notice to Concerns of Hazards and Deficiencies, everything on that list is directly tied to the standards of practice. So if we put something right there as a bullet point, that directly affects the standards of practice. So we need to be careful where we insert this information.
Ron?
So,
sorry, it's kind of breaking up. There's 2 things. One, while that is true what you're saying about the notice of consumer hazards, that's not a rule. And there is no guideline in place for what can or cannot be in that section. I did want to point that out. And the second thing, if you don't think there's anybody that considers it urgent that something be done on this, why did we have a special meeting called for it? I think there are people who do consider that there's something needs to be done before the legislature gets involved. So that's just the point for y'all to consider. And again, Tony's right. This is a proposal that will have to go through 2 hearings, and while the suggested language is rough and may not suit everybody, it has time to be revised.
During the public comment process.
Correct. That's 2 more meetings.
Correct.
But I think what people are looking for is action and not promise of action.
I have a question. This is Barbara. Should we go ahead and vote on these 2 proposals and then come back to the language so we have that done?
Thank you, Barbara. Yes, we were starting to talk about the language, but whenever I called on Lee, so that was the discussion we had with Lee. And thank you, Barbara, for bringing us back around. We did get off topic. And let me just. So I called on Lee, and Greg, I called on you already about the discussion on it.
Yes, I was in favor of adding it into the preamble and asking it to be put into the seller.
Right. Okay. And then Fred, and then Elizabeth. So we're good. Right now we have a majority vote that says yes to add it to the preamble.
And the OP1 form.
And Brian, I apologize, and the OPI one as well? OPI form of me? Okay.
That is correct, because they're tied together in this instant. So Brad, I'll come back to you again for the second part, so making your new motion on taking it to the commissioners for the seller's disclosure.
My motion is to make a recommendation to the commission to take it to the broker lawyer committee for language to be added to the seller's disclosure.
And do I have a second?
A second.
Second.
Okay. So we have Fred as the second. And so just, Greg, do you have any discussion for it?
Who?
Greg, you can. You have a discussion point for it?
No, I have no discussion.
Okay, and for or against? Greg?
I'm for that. I'm for it.
Okay. Fred Wilcox, discussion?
No discussion. I'm for it.
For it. Lee Warren, discussion?
No discussion. I'm for it.
Okay. Barbara?
I'm for it.
Okay. Steve?
I'm for it.
Okay, and then Brad. Well, you made a motion.
Obviously,
Okay.
I'm for it.
Right. Sorry about that. So we have a majority vote that to go to the commissioners and make a recommendation for adding CSST to the seller's disclosure. So we'll roundabout back to this point to fine-tuning a recommendation to put in the consumer's notice to recognize hazards and also in the preamble, which this would change our report form again, I guess, to 7-5. That the language that we have is that was suggested. I made it public, or I pushed it to the public just a while ago. That suggested we're lacking a bonding and tubing, or the metal tubing. So, Fred, since you put this up there, how do you want to see that corrected?
I'm comfortable with the language as put in there now, the lack of bonding or lack of bonding on corrugated stainless steel gas tubing, CSST, where required, or other metal tubing. Yeah, where required.
Brian, put lack of visible bonding.
Okay. Go
It's
ahead,
redundant, but it's clear that way.
I understand.
I have no issue with that.
And if regular steel bonding is not, or steel pipe is not grounded, I mean, we're just targeting CSST.
No, you're not. Add
other
metal. Yeah.
I thought you were taking that out.
No,
yeah.
add it in.
Right? Yes. Brian, is that right, what's on the screen?
That's kind of like with the bullet that's right above where we're adding it already.
Right.
It is.
It's basically making it specific to that topic.
That's being more specific, and I'm in favor of that. This is Brad.
Lack of visible bonding on corrugated stainless steel tubing.
Since Lee is in, I believe Lee has started the SOP review. If we're changing the form, are there any other urgent changes that we would want to combine? He's working on the standards of practice.
Lee,
That's
that
a
was
great
a
question, Steve.
Well, I'm picturing this coming out with a new form and all the software developers pulling their hair out, and then at the same time, Lee has already, I believe, started on the annual review, and like when I did, there were probably some things is like, man, we ought to change that right away if we're going to do the form. You know, I'm thinking, are we going to go through a couple of changes this year on the form?
Steve?
Yes,
Are you
sir.
talking about the 20 minutes of tirade about changing the form and the 37 seconds it takes to type this in?
No, if we're changing the preamble, that's a new form number for software developers.
I understand, but it's a copy and paste. Adding one line is not onerous.
And getting it to all of the inspectors. I'm saying if we're going to potentially do this twice this year, then...
No, I appreciate your point, and if someone does have something, one, it's not on the agenda, but it can be on the next one, and I do think it ought to be discussed. I don't have anything offhand, but I thought you raised an excellent point.
Mr. Murphy, this is Brad Phillips again.
Go ahead.
I think the motion had been made and passed on both those issues. Anything beyond that is a different topic.
Correct. And so what I'm going to go through right now on the particular language, the lack of visible bonding on corrugated stainless steel tubing, CSST, or other metal tubing or piping where required. So I'm just going to go through each one of the members now and see if this is agreeable language for you or if you have a suggested change to this language to take to the commissioners. So Greg, I'll start with you.
It's fine with me.
Okay, thank you. Fred Wilcox?
It's good with me.
Lee?
I'm okay with it for now.
Okay, Barbara?
Agreeable for now.
Okay, Steve? Steve Reinhardt on the language.
I said agree again.
Okay, and then Brad.
I agree.
Okay, then we'll take this language as a recommendation to take before the commissioners on February the 9th. Yes. To let them know that we have covered this topic and we're making a recommendation to add this to the preamble and also to the consumer's notice of the OPI form. And I will call on Avis real quick and just see if there's anything that you would like to talk about on this particular subject. Avis, are you able to hear me? Okay. And then Bill Jones, are you able to hear me?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Do you have any further recommendations or discussion?
Well, Brian, I was on mute and I couldn't unmute, so go ahead, Bill.
Well, I think that you guys have covered a lot of material here and exhaustively looked at this. I would remind you that the OPI is clearly a voluntary form, and so to depend on that to be the cure-all of identification simply doesn't work that way, and it can be changed in one meeting insofar. And the other point is that having the honor of serving on broker lawyer, I am not optimistic that they will undertake changing the seller's disclosure, but I do think that there's another path available to you, that there's a number of associations from Austin, the ones I'm aware of, Austin and Metro Texas and North Texas and Houston and the Texas Association of Realtors that have a seller's disclosure, that by approaching or reaching out to them, I think this could be a message that they would certainly embrace and move forward with, understanding, or somebody helping them understand the gravity of the matter before them. And I defer back to the chair, Avis.
Okay.
No, I absolutely agree with. Can you hear me?
Go ahead, Avis.
I agree with Bill, and I will tell you that my experience, although Carrie has indicated as general counsel that the broker lawyer committee can take action, my experience historically with the broker lawyer committee and the seller disclosure document is that they have been unwilling to make any changes except those forced by the legislature. And that's not been the brokers on the broker lawyer, that's been the attorneys on the broker lawyer for various legal reasons. And it's not time to get into that. So I think Bill's suggestion is well taken, and I will be happy to help you guys with at least the Texas Association of Realtors and maybe the Austin Board of Realtors, because those two entities I belong to see if they will take some kind of action. Maybe Brian could get with the Joint Justice to look at the one up in Dallas and others in other part of the state until we can get the legislature, if that's the path we choose to go, to take action. And I want you guys to know how much I appreciate your action, and I want to tell you that I know you have exhaustively looked at this. I personally believe you probably don't know that Tony and Doug and Carrie and I have spent a lot of time with the manufacturers and the fire marshal and the various people that they all represent, attempting to come to some sort of resolution before a resolution was forced upon you and us by the legislature. And I appreciate you being willing to look at this.
Thank you, Avis. And for clarification a little bit, we are going to, we're recommending that this notice be put in the TREC inspector report form that goes out to all the consumers served by inspectors in the state of Texas, and also the OPI form. So it's going to go into 2 different locations, and we can at least show due diligence that we have started the process, and this is at least a notice that will go out to every consumer upon an inspection, but also that during the inspection or the standards of practice review, it is still going to continue to be addressed during that portion, during the review, because the SOP review, it could be 12 months, it could be 18 months. I've seen it take 3 years for one and 18 months for another. So it is not a topic that's dying right here, but we're showing that we are at least addressing it right now, and that the process will continue during the full review of the standards as well. So this will go, we're making this recommendation to go into the preamble that goes into currently the 7-4. And then we have some public members that would like to speak that are at the commission, down in Austin. I do have an 11 o'clock meeting that I need to get to, so if we could keep it short, it'll take me about 10 minutes to drive to where I need to go. So if we can keep them short so I can still make my 11 o'clock meeting. So Tony, I'm going to hand it over to you. Let's try to keep them at 2-3 minutes a person.
Sure. My name is Mark Goodson. It is my honor to represent the late Brennan Teal, who died in the CSSC fire. I have 4 patents on CSSC improvements. I'm here really to offer myself as a resource. I'm the engineer, first engineer ever on the state electrical board. I am the engineer at the fire marshal's office on their scientific advisory work group. Some of the things I've heard this morning: lack of visible bonding. Bonding per se was really not required till 2009 under the fuel gas code. Prior to that, it was satisfactory to use an equipment grounding conductor as the bond, and that's all for purposes of electric shock. It was never to deal with lightning. The comment was made, black CSST doesn't require an additional bond. Well, that's what the manufacturers say. However, the fuel gas code says otherwise. And I will tell you, bonding and grounding does not work. That's the reason Brennan Teal was killed. He was in a house that was bonded and grounded for code. It doesn't work. If you do bonding and grounding wrong, you create a fire hazard. It makes the building more dangerous rather than safer in the case of a lightning strike. Anyway, there's a whole lot of information out there. I'm happy to help you. I'd do whatever you want. I've got, as I say, 4 patents on this. I need to disclose that. 4 patents on safety improvements for CSST. In terms of the statistics, it doesn't show up on the statistics because people don't know how to investigate a CSST fire. These are quite new. Moreover, what's known as the NFIRS, the National Fire Incident Reporting System, the error rate is horrendous on there. The difference between other problems you may have in the house and CSST is this is fuel gas. If you hit lightning on, say, a water pipe, you get a water leak. Nobody cares. We can fix that. Same with faucets, things like that. It may burn out your refrigerator. You get a CSST strike to CSST, you have a rapidly developing and moving fire that in a matter of minutes can pretty much take out a house. Anyway, that's what I've got to offer. I'm happy to help you if you got any questions. I've been on this topic for the last almost 12 years, and
And what else can I say? I probably said too much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Brian?
Go ahead.
Yeah, this is Doug. Up on the screen, we've highlighted two words on the language that you guys have recommended, and I'd like to talk about both of them briefly. One is that the word gas, it's a technical correction, was moved from before the parenthetical CSST to after or into metal gas tubing for accuracy. So corrugated stainless steel tubing, also known as CSST, or other metal gas tubing is the way that it was approved previously. The word gas appeared immediately before the word tubing in the CSST. So I think that is that's a technical correction that I would like you guys to consider accepting before the recommendation, as the text of the recommendation going forward.
Okay, thank you, Doug.
Okay, and then the last item is the word visible. Because this recommendation is that this appear in the list of hazards, the real question is the lack of visibility the hazard, or the lack of bonding the hazard? Because I truly understand Fred's desire to have that in there to I think to ensure that it's reinforced in the standard that this is a visual inspection. But that's taken care of in any future, well, in the report writing and the standard, any future changes to the standard of practice. But this particular one, I'm wondering if in fact, if we just remove the word visible, the hazard is the lack of proper bonding, not necessarily whether that bonding is visible. Although the code requires it to be visible, that's whether it's present is the hazard, not whether it's visible. So that would be my suggestion for your discussion, whether or not that word is appropriate there.
Doug, this is Fred, if I may respond. The issue with bond, the gentleman who spoke previously talked about the requirement and the age of the requirement or the timing, and that before that was a branch circuit bond, which is correct. But bonds have to be visible, and they have to be accessible for servicing and maintenance. And it is a reinforcement of the standards of practice and of what we do. If you go into an attic, and I sent pictures out of this, particularly on CSST, if you can't see the bond, then it's not installed correctly. Now, Doug, the other side of that, which I also wrote about, is CSST actually does have a bond. If you take an ohm meter and measure from hard pipe to hard pipe on either side of CSST, you will get continuity showing an electrical bond, an electrical pathway. It's not visible, but it's there. But that does not meet the requirement of the code. Similarly, you may have a bonding situation somehow if you have plastic gas pipe, but plastic gas pipe still requires a bonding jumper that would be visible on both sides of the plastic flex. So I think visible is not only a reiteration of what we do, but I think it's a necessary one to convey to inspectors and to the public. If you can't see it, it ain't there by the rules. I think it is important in this case for those reasons.
So let me just make sure that I understand. When you say, let's just assume for a minute that it truly is there, but not visible.
Mm-hmm. It is.
Okay.
CSST does have an electrical bond. It's just not an effective bond.
No, that's not the point.
Okay.
The point is if it's hidden inside a wall, I know it shouldn't be, or if it's in an inaccessible crawl space or something, the bond actually exists, but it's not visible. Is there an increased hazard that requires, not talking about code because it's not a code inspection, but is there an increased hazard because the bond is not visible? That's my only point. And if the answer is yes, then leave it in there.
Yes. And the reason being, Doug, by literal interpretation of the rules, if it's not visible, it doesn't exist.
That's simply inaccurate, Fred. Sorry. That is not the interpretation of the rule.
Well, okay. We'll discuss it in the future, I imagine.
I'm sure we will.
Good. Again, Doug, we're at the starting point. If we come to the conclusion that you're right and I'm wrong, which has been the case in the past, then we'll change this.
No, that's quite right. But I do think, Brian, this is just a suggestion that we that you get a consensus that moving the word gas is the language that we want to go forward, and then leave visible in there so that doesn't require any change, if that's the consensus.
I'll make that motion if it needs a motion.
Okay, thanks, Doug. Tony, is there anybody else down there that wants to talk?
Yes, someone has a question.
Okay.
This is Mark Goodson again. You used the word visible bonding. Are you speaking actually of the direct bond that started to be required in 2009? Or are you speaking of an equipment grounding conductor, which up until 2009 was accepted?
The requirement for visible in my reading of the code is for either. A bonding jumper is a connection that requires servicing and maintenance. And under that rule of the code, it would have to be accessible for servicing and maintenance and visible. So my reading of the code says in either case.
The reason I say that, you can have a gas stove that uses electricity for the controls. The electric code interpretation by the NFPA is that when you plug in that appliance into a grounded outlet, you have bonded the gas system. Is that y'all's understanding or the intent here?
And thank you for bringing that up. But it is very widely known that you have to have the bond on CSST. So that's what we're really discussing, is not through the equipment ground, but a physical, separate bonding wire, bonding conductor that goes back to the electrical equipment or ground electrode systems. So, we are discussing the fact that it needs to have an external one connected to the hard pipe before the CSST. So we are familiar with it.
Brian, I'm somewhat confused by this discussion because in this, for example, we have requirements for GFCIs regardless of the date of construction of the house.
Correct.
Okay? The hazard exists regardless of the date of construction of the house or the date that the rule came in. The hazard still exists. It's the same theory that we have with GFCIs.
Yeah. And Fred, we understand it, okay? So I think we're good there. Tony, is there anybody else that needs to speak that's with you in your office?
I got one comment.
Yes, there's one more comment.
I would only suggest this, Mark Goodson, again, when you say visible bonding, I would put in the word in parentheses direct so that it is clear that we're not talking about EGC, that you were talking about the additional bond wire that was started to be required in the 2009 fuel gas code. So that's it.
Okay. Tony, is there anybody else?
I don't know if, just to make comment, Brian, I don't know if when I muted Mr. Cothran, if he was unable to type comments. I got an email from him saying he was unable to type comments, so I don't know if he has anything he wants to add or...
okay, go ahead and unmute him.
Okay. Mr. Cothran?
Mike Cothran, do you have anything that you would like to add to this as a public comment?
Sure. Good morning. Thank you for unmuting me, and I'm sorry. I think it was my phone that was overriding everybody. I think I've typed in to everyone what I intended to say. I have noticed that there's several more type-ins down there, and they have not been at least spoken for the record, Brian, so I would encourage you to do that. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you, Mike. Okay, so we'll go. Tony, is there anybody else there that would like to make a public comment? Nobody else has typed anything else in. So.
Yes, sir. There's one more comment.
This is Lavera Vincent, the director of the Brennan Hill Foundation for Gas Line Safety. I would just like to say that we were established in October, so we are ever evolving. Each day we are learning, and I ask that each of you use your resources to help us better educate the public. And with that, that's all I have.
Thank you for that, and I think we're good. Thank you. Yes. Okay. With no further comment, I go through the list one more time because we made some minor changes. Greg, are you good with the visible and the gas being in where it is?
Yes, I'm good with it as it is.
Okay. Fred Wilcox.
Yes.
Okay. Lee Warren. Lee, you still with us?
Yeah, sorry. I'm good with the way it is. This is kind of what I brought up before. Let's just leave it as it is now. It has to go through 2 more review processes. I'm sure we'll make adjustments. Let's just get this on the books. Just get that ball rolling and let's move forward.
Okay, thank you. And Barbara Evans?
Yes, I'm good with that.
And Steve Reinhardt?
Yes.
Okay. And Brad Phillips?
Yes. Yes, I'm good.
It sounds like we've addressed the 2 agenda items that we have on hand, and I will take this before the commissioners on February the 9th during the commission meeting. So, Tony, if you'll do me a favor and just have us have an agenda item there for the commissioners.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Is there any further discussion? Well, no, we've covered the 2 topics very well. I'd like to thank everybody for being here. It is 10:34, and at this time we've addressed all of our agenda items, and we are now done with the committee meeting at this time. Thank you for being here.
The next committee meeting.
Oh, Brian?
Yes.
I just wanted to say, just to remind everyone, there's an inspector committee meeting on February 27th in Austin, just to remind everybody of that.
Okay. Okay, sounds real good. Thank you.
All right.
Good day.
Thank you.